The cold was so sharp it felt like it was cutting my face. I was running through a dark forest, snow up to my ankles, with no idea where I was going. Branches slapped my cheeks. My lungs were on fire from the freezing air. I didn't look back. I just ran, and then I tripped. I fell hard, face first, into the snow. I tasted blood and pine needles. I pushed myself up on shaky legs and kept going because stopping meant he would catch me. That's when I heard the growl. Came from right in front of me. I froze behind a tree and looked out into a clearing. 2 pairs of glowing eyes stared back. Then I saw more shapes moving in the shadows. They were massive wolves standing in a silent standoff. Their hot breath made clouds in the cold air. I put my hands over my mouth. I knew what this was. My friend Leo had warned me. This was Black Fang territory, and I was right in the middle of a border fight. The snarls exploded out of nowhere. The sound was like rocks breaking. A huge black wolf threw a gray one aside like it was nothing. The gray wolf slid through the snow and stopped right at my feet. Its yellow eyes rolled back in its head. I scrambled back against a tree. I could smell wet fur and blood. The black wolf shook his dark coat. He was the alpha, I knew it. Then he turned his head, and his golden eyes locked directly onto mine. He took one step toward me, then another. It was a slow, deliberate stalk. I held my breath. My whole body went cold. I knew I should run, but my legs wouldn't work. His eyes never left my face. I saw an old claw mark on his cheek. His lips pulled back, not in a snarl, but in something that looked like shock. Then he was right in front of me. My exhaustion won. My knees buckled and I collapsed forward into the snow at his feet. As I fell, my hand brushed against his front paw. A sudden, terrible warmth flooded my chest, followed by a deep, primal terror. It felt like a lock clicking shut inside me. His head jerked back like he'd been struck. We both knew what it meant. The fight, the chaos. None of it mattered anymore. Whatever came next, I hadn't figured out why touching him felt like a key turning in a lock I never knew I had. The next thing I knew, I was in a quiet room that smelled like old books and smoke. I was sitting stiff in a leather chair by a fire. Kalen Thorne, the alpha, was cleaning a cut on my arm with a rough cloth. His touch was careful, but his jaw was locked tight. He didn't look at my face. He just focused on the blood and dirt on my skin. His hands were large, capable, and I felt this pull deep in my chest just from him being near. It was a warm, heavy ache. His scent filled the space around me, leather and cold night air. It felt like a place I knew but couldn't name. His hand stopped. The cloth in his fingers trembled. He dropped it into a bowl of water with a small splash. A low sound escaped him. It wasn't a growl. It was something pained. And human, he stared at his own hand like it had betrayed him. "Why does it hurt?" I whispered. I didn't pull my arm away. Our faces were closer now. I could see the scar on his cheek. He looked at my mouth, then my eyes, his breath caught. "The bond," he said. His voice was raw. "My wolf knows you. It wants what it wants. I am telling it no." He said it like a confession he never meant to make. The warmth between us flared into a sharp sting. I saw him flinch. He was causing himself pain to keep from touching me. He almost leaned in. I saw the shift in his shoulders. Then he stood up fast and turned his back to me. His hands were tight fists at his sides. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but his voice was rough. The firelight outlined the tense line of his body. I stayed in the chair. I didn't run. I needed to understand what this was, even if it broke me. The space between us was full of every word we did not say. I tried to put it away and just get on with things. But the question of why he was hurting himself to keep from touching me, it refused to stay put. The sting from where he'd cleaned my cuts was still there on my skin. I stood in the archway of a big, dark hall. It smelled like cold ash. Kalen stood by a huge fireplace, his back to me, shoulders rigid in the gray dawn light. "Leo, take her to the border. Now." He pointed at the heavy front door. His voice was a command that made the air feel thin. I hugged my arms around myself. Outside, the moon was still visible in the dark sky. Leo, my friend, stood between me and the door. He didn't move. He shook his head once, his eyes on Kalen. "The moon forces the change soon. The woods will be full of wolves." He glanced at me, his face tight with worry. "She is a human." He paused, then said the words like they were a solid, heavy fact. "She is yours." The truth of it settled in my stomach like a stone. The warmth behind my ribs pulsed, a quiet echo of his closeness. It wasn't my own. That was the part I couldn't get past. Real quick, if you're here to find out what this strange bond means, hit subscribe, because the answer is about to get a whole lot more complicated. He finally peeled the old bandage back. His fingers were careful, but the air between my skin and his hand felt charged. I stared at the wall, at a knot in the wood grain, and tried to just be still. The salve from the tin was cold. I flinched when it touched the raw cut. He stopped. "It will sting," he said, his voice low, "but it will keep the fever away." I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. He started to clean the wound. His touch was methodical, clinical. He was treating me like a problem he needed to fix, but his breathing, it was too measured, like he was holding himself under a tight leash. I couldn't help it. I glanced at his face. He was staring at my shoulder, his jaw locked. A muscle jumped in his cheek. He was causing himself pain just to do this simple thing. To keep from touching me any more than he absolutely had to. "Why?" The word was out before I could stop it. His hand stilled. He didn't look up. "Why what?" "This," I gestured weakly with my good arm. "The room, the lock, the distance. If I'm yours, like Leo said, if this bond is real, why does it seem like you're fighting it?" For a long time, he didn't answer. He finished cleaning the cut and reached for a fresh bandage. He smoothed it over my skin, his fingers finally making contact. It was just a brush, a necessary one. But that same sharp warmth flared under my ribs, bright and sudden. I saw him flinch. He pulled his hand back like he'd been burned. He stood up so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. He turned his back to me, his shoulders a hard line against the lamplight. "You shouldn't be here," he said again. But this time his voice was rough. It sounded torn. I stayed on the bed. I didn't run. I was so tired of running. I needed to understand, even if the truth was something that broke me. The space between us was full of every word he wouldn't say. I tried to shove it all down, to just get through the next minute. But the question of why my touch caused him physical pain, it refused to stay buried. The sting from the salve was still there on my skin. I stood in the archway of a big, dark hall inside the main house. It smelled like cold ash and old stone. Dawn was just a gray smear at the high windows. Kalen stood by a huge, empty fireplace, his back to me. "Leo," he said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "Take her to the border, now." He pointed at the heavy front door. It wasn't a request. It was a command that made the air feel thin. I hugged my arms around myself. Outside, the last of the moon was a pale smudge in the dark sky. Leo, my friend, stood between me and the door. He didn't move. He shook his head once, his eyes on Kalen's back. "The moon forces the change soon. The woods will be full of wolves." He glanced at me, his face tight. "She is a human." He paused, like the next words were stones he had to lift. "She is yours." The truth of it landed in my stomach. Heavy, final. A sharp sound escaped Kalen then, a punched-out grunt like he'd been hit. He staggered back a step. His hand flew to the center of his chest. My own breath caught. A phantom ache bloomed right under my sternum. I stared at my hands, clean and human in the dim light, and felt that deep, foreign warmth spread behind my ribs. It was his. I knew it was his. Kalen looked from Leo to me. His gray eyes were wide. The authority was gone from his posture. He just looked, wrecked. He sank onto the arm of a worn leather chair and ran a hand over his short hair. For a long moment, he was just a man who had run out of road. "Change of plan," he finally said, his voice a low scrape. "Take her to the secure room downstairs. The one with the silver lattice door." He looked at me, and his eyes held a terrible, raw apology. "Lock her in." But that warmth behind my ribs, the one that wasn't mine, I still had no answer for it. The ghost of his hand on my shoulder still burned. I followed him into the roaring chaos of the main hall. The wind screamed against the windows. The fire spat embers onto the stone hearth. Kalen stood with his back to me, facing the main doors as they shuddered against the storm. His right hand was clenched into a fist at his side. That's when I smelled it. Wet pine. And cold, sharp anger. A man stood just inside the doorway, shaking rain from his coat. He had long blonde hair and a chain tattoo snaking up his forearm. He looked at me over Kalen's shoulder and smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "You're early, Roderick," Kalen said. His voice was low and steady. "The challenge circle isn't prepared for you." "I don't need a circle for a conversation," the man, Roderick, said. He took a step forward. The firelight caught the cold blue of his eyes. "A border patrol found something of mine. I'm here to collect it." His eyes slid back to me. "I see you found something of mine as well. An Omega wandering alone. Finders keepers isn't pack law, Kalen." Kalen moved. He didn't turn around, but he shifted his body to block Roderick's line of sight to me completely. I saw the muscles go tight along his neck. "You have no claim here," Kalen said. You forfeited that when you turned rogue. You will leave my territory. Now. Roderick's smile didn't waver. I'm declaring a formal territorial challenge. Sunrise, 3 days from now, or forfeit your title and your pack. He paused, his head tilted like he was listening to the storm. But I'll take the Omega with me tonight, as a gesture of good faith. He wasn't human. I had to keep reminding myself of that. The thought was ice in my stomach. Kalen went very still. It was a different stillness from before. This wasn't control. This was a predator about to spring. He spoke, and his voice dropped so low I almost felt it more than heard it. You will not touch her. The air in the room seemed to thicken. It pressed down on my lungs. Roderick looked from Kalen's rigid back to my face. He inhaled deeply, like he was tasting the air. I can smell her fear from here, he said softly. And your claim is so new it barely clings to her skin. It won't survive my bite. Turned. He walked back into the storm and pulled the heavy door shut behind him. The hall went too quiet, just the crackle of the fire and the howl of the wind. Kalen didn't turn around. He stared at the closed door. His shoulders rose and fell with a single deep breath. Then he looked down at his own left hand. He opened it slowly, staring at his palm like he was reading something written there. He looked at my scar that same way, right before he told me to leave. He was looking for weakness. For a way to let go. The metallic tang of fear still coated my tongue. I followed Kalen's rigid back into the great hall. The heat from the massive hearth hit my chilled skin like a wall. Roderick Vex was already there. He stood near the long wooden table, his posture relaxed in a way that felt like a threat. His cold blue eyes tracked us, and he didn't look away from Kalen. He stepped forward into the open space before the fire. He stared right at Kalen, his arms crossed over his chest. The flames glinted on the broken chain tattoo around his left forearm. Well, he said, his voice was too smooth. The great alpha returns with his little stray. He looked past Kalen's shoulder, directly at me. My breath hitched. I felt Kalen go completely still beside me. That stray isn't part of this pack, Alpha, Roderick said. He pointed a finger at me, his lip curling. His tone was mocking, meant to cut. She smells of fear and city concrete. She has no place here. She's just a human you found in the snow. I wanted to argue. The words stuck in my throat. He was right in all the worst ways. Kalen moved. He stepped squarely between Roderick and me. A low growl rumbled from his chest. It vibrated in the stone floor under my boots. His shoulders were wide enough to block my view of the other man entirely. The line of his back was a wall of tense muscle. I saw his fingers flex, then curl into fists. He hadn't touched me to move me. He just placed himself in the way. She is under my protection, Kalen commanded. His voice was flat. It left no room, but something in me rebelled at being hidden. I wasn't a thing to be shielded. I stepped out from behind him. My side brushed his arm. A flicker of warmth shot through the contact. Brief, undeniable. I saw his jaw clench. A muscle jumped near his ear. He didn't look at me. He kept his eyes locked on Roderick. You have no claim here, Kalen said again. Your challenge is for territory. Not for people. Roderick smiled. It was a cold thing. Everything in this territory is part of the challenge, he said, including the strays you collect. He looked at me again. His smile widened. When you fall, little one, you'll need a new protector. Think on that. Then he turned. He walked out of the hall, leaving the heavy door open to the cold night. One thing kept pulling at me. That warmth. The one that shot through me when my side brushed his arm. The cold, rigid press of the signet ring Kalen had forced onto my finger still ached against my knuckle. I followed him into the dim study. The sharp, clean scent of cedar shelves cut through the hall's lingering smoke. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind me. I stood there, my own breathing loud in the sudden quiet. Kalen went to the window. His broad shoulders blocked the weak light. He didn't turn around. You said I was under your protection, I said. My voice sounded small. That was a lie. He went very still. Then he turned. His gray eyes looked tired. It was not a lie. It felt like one, I said. I wrapped my arms around myself. The wool of my sweater itched. You made it sound like I was just another piece in your game, like a thing you owned. Kalen looked down at the floor between us. He ran a hand over his short black hair. His fingers pressed hard against his scalp. I had to say it like that, he said. His voice was rough. The pack needed to hear strength, not feeling. I watched him. His left hand hung at his side. The fingers were half curled. I remembered how he'd stared at that same hand in the hall. Now I saw a faint tremor run through those fingers. Quick, and then it was gone. He was holding himself together by force. I took a small step forward. My anger faded into something colder, sharper. Was it for me? I asked. The question felt dangerous. Or was it just against him? Kalen finally looked at me. The distance was just a few feet. The pull in my chest was a steady warmth, an ache to close the gap. His eyes dropped to my mouth for 1 second. His jaw tightened. Then he turned his face back to the window. He didn't answer. He didn't reach for me. Whatever I felt, it might just be the bond talking. The weight of what he wouldn't say filled the quiet room. And why he'd looked at my mouth before turning away, I had a feeling I wasn't going to like the answer. The cold weight of his silence sat like a stone in my gut. I stepped beyond the manor's last cobblestone and into the shadow of the pines. The air smelled of damp earth and rain. Roderick Vex was already backing away. He wiped blood from the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. His cold blue eyes fixed on Kalen, who stood beside me. "You won this ground," Roderick said. His voice was rough, bitter. "But the territory is more than dirt and trees." His attention shifted to me. I felt Kalen move then, a slight shift of his weight. His hand came to rest on my shoulder. The contact was firm, deliberate. It wasn't a gentle touch, it was a statement. A warmth spread from that point, contradicting the chill in the air. The same warmth I'd felt before, but now it was an anchor. Roderick's eyes dropped to Kalen's hand on me. A faint, sickly yellow light glowed in his pupils for a second. "The full moon comes for everyone," Roderick said. His words were slow, heavy with threat. Kalen's hand tightened on my shoulder. He didn't look at me. He kept his gray eyes locked on Roderick. The line of his jaw was hard, but I saw the muscle there twitch once, a small crack in his control. He paused a beat too long before he answered. "It does, and it will find you outside my borders," he said, "or it will find you dead." Roderick smiled then. It was a cold, sharp expression that showed his teeth. "We'll see how strong your claim is then." His look swept over me again. It felt like a violation. "She smells of fear and human medicine. That is not a strength. It is a weakness waiting to be opened." He took another step back into the thicker trees. "I will peel your protection from her piece by piece, Kalen, starting with what you hold dearest." He turned and melted into the deep shadows. The last thing I saw was the tattoo of a broken chain on his left forearm as he pushed a branch aside. Then he was gone. We stood there in the sudden quiet. The only sound was the wind and the high pine branches. Kalen's hand was still on my shoulder. He was looking at the place where Roderick had disappeared. His breathing was even, but I could feel a fine tension humming through his grip. And what he meant by what Kalen held dearest, I knew that wasn't going away. My knuckles still ached from my grip on the steering wheel. The warehouse door groaned open on rusted hinges. A damp, concrete smell breathed out into the night. I followed Leo inside, my steps silent on the gritty floor. He moved with a purpose I didn't share. The air was thick with old motor oil and mold. Leo crouched behind a tower of wooden crates. He put a finger to his lips. I knelt beside him, the cold seeping through my jeans. From the other side of the crates, a familiar voice cut through the quiet. "Roderick Vex." His words were clear, cold. "The next shipment moves at the full moon. The Omega Child is just the start. We have 3 more in the city, ready for transport." I felt my blood go cold. His world had rules I didn't understand, rules I couldn't survive. Kalen's eyes went wide with horror. He shifted his weight and a rotten floorboard cracked under his boot. The talking on the other side stopped. Heavy footsteps started toward our hiding spot. Kalen scrambled back, his shoulder bumping a crate. A cloud of dust fell around us. I grabbed his arm to pull him up, but it was too late. 2 large men rounded the crates. They weren't pack. Their faces were hard and blank. Rough hands grabbed Leo and yanked him away from me. A third man threw a coarse sack over his head. Leo fought, his legs kicking out, but more hands held him down. "Would the pack even know we were gone?" he shouted, his voice muffled by the cloth. One of the men drove a fist into his stomach. Leo made a terrible choking sound and went still. Roderick Vex walked into view. He looked at me and his mouth curved into a smile. He didn't look at the men holding Leo. He only looked at me. "Tell Kalen," he said. His voice was quiet. "Tell him his protection only reaches as far as his strength, and his strength is about to be tested." Then he turned and walked away. His men dragged Leo's limp form behind them into the deeper dark. Why Roderick Vex only looked at me? I'd been wrong to ignore it this long. My knuckles were still raw from the punch I'd thrown. The forest path felt soft under my boots. I ran harder, my breath tearing in my chest. A dark shape moved from the trees ahead. Kalen stepped onto the path. He stood like a wall. Going somewhere? His voice was a low rumble. I tried to dodge past him. He moved faster. His hand shot out and caught my arm. His grip was like iron. Leo is in trouble, let me go. His whole body went rigid. I saw a tremor start in his shoulder. And you'll get taken too, he shouted back. It wasn't a command, it was pure fear. He pulled me closer. His face was anguished. In that moment I didn't see anger. I saw terror looking back at me. His grip loosened just a fraction. He didn't let go. Instead, he rested his forehead against mine. His breathing was hard and fast against my skin. I stood perfectly still. This was the thing he held dearest. The thing Roderick could take. Not territory, not pride. This fragile point where our breaths mixed in the cold air. His control had shattered into this single, terrified point of contact. He was trying to protect it by locking it away. I understood that now. I didn't move. I didn't pull back. The warmth of the bond was a quiet ache in my chest, a pull I chose not to resist just then. We stayed like that for a long time, saying nothing at all. The phantom pressure of Kalen's grip still lingered around my wrist. Roderick Vex's outpost smelled of steel and ozone. I saw Leo first. He was tied to a metal chair. A deep purple bruise spread across his cheekbone. Roderick paced a slow circle around him. He held Leo's phone in one hand. Your alpha is weak, Roderick said. He stopped to stare at me. His voice was flat. He cares more for his mate than his pack. That is a fatal flaw. He turned the phone screen toward Leo. I saw a grainy live feed of an empty forest road, our pack's northern border. No guards were visible. Leo strained against the ropes. They bit into his skin, but he didn't make a sound. Alara is special, Roderick whispered. He leaned close to Leo's ear but kept his cold eyes locked on me. She is a key. A true omega in human skin. I saw Leo go very still. His breath caught. I understood then. He finally knew what they wanted with me. It wasn't just about territory. Roderick wanted the bond itself. He wanted its power. Roderick dialed a number on Leo's phone. He held it up to Leo's ear. I could hear the faint ring. Kalen's voice answered, tight with control. Leo, report. Roderick smiled a thin, sharp smile. He looked only at me as he spoke into the receiver. Your beta can't talk right now, but your mate is listening. Come and get her. Bring only yourself. He ended the call. The silence that followed was absolute. My own breathing was too loud in my ears. He hadn't chosen me. The bond had. There was a difference. That difference was going to get us all killed. The sharp ache in my jaw wouldn't go away. I stood at the edge of the pack hall. The air smelled of old smoke. Kalen stood in the center before his pack. His eyes were shadowed. He promised them Leo would be found. He said Roderick's threat would be answered. The pack watched him, their worry a low hum. I felt their stares on my back. The heavy double doors crashed open. Roderick Vex strode inside. He ignored Kalen completely. His cold eyes found me across the room. He pointed a long finger straight at my face. That human is the weakness in our walls, he announced. He began to circle the edge of the hall toward me. The pack shifted, creating a wide space around me. I felt my breath short. I forced myself to stand still. Kalen moved before I could blink. He placed his body squarely between Roderick and me. A low growl rumbled from his chest. You dare challenge me in my own hall? Kalen asked. His voice was pure gravel. The air grew heavy. I saw the muscle in Kalen's neck cord tight with strain. Roderick just smiled his thin smile. He looked past Kalen, his eyes locking onto mine. I don't need to challenge him, Roderick said. His own choices bind him. Protecting a stray makes him vulnerable. For a second I saw not anger in Kalen's face, but a flash of raw fear. It was for me. The bond between us gave a single, painful throb in my chest. Then I stepped out from behind Kalen. I moved to his side, my legs steady. I faced Roderick myself. I am not a stray, I said. My voice was clear in the quiet hall. I am not a weakness. I looked at the watching pack, at their uncertain faces. I am a reason to fight smarter. Roderick's smile faded. He studied me, then gave a slow, mocking nod. He took a step back toward the doors. A pretty speech, he said. It changes nothing. Your human friend is still gone. Your alpha is still compromised. He turned and left without another word. The doors swung shut behind him. The silence he left behind was worse than his accusations. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. In the sudden quiet of the hall, the only sound was the slow drip of water from my jacket cuff onto the floor. Kalen stood rigid beside me, then his hand closed around my upper arm. He didn't speak. He just turned and pulled me with him, away from the murmuring pack and through a side door. We were in a narrow, dark hallway lined with old supply shelves. He pushed the door shut with his other hand and leaned back against it. His chest was moving fast. The only light came from a dusty window at the far end. I looked at the hand gripping my arm. His knuckles were white. Then I saw his other hand, the one braced against the door. It was shaking. The tremor was small but constant. I stared at it. This was the man who had just faced down a rival without blinking. The sight of that scared me more than his anger ever could. "I can't lose control," he whispered. He didn't look at me. His head was bowed, his eyes shut tight. "Not again." The words were so quiet I almost didn't hear them. They sounded ripped from somewhere deep. They were an answer to a question I hadn't asked. I finally got it. I understood what was in Roderick's smile. It wasn't about winning. It was about proving Kalen could break. We stood there in the silent dark. He was so close I felt the heat from his body. My hand twitched at my side. The pull to reach out was a heavy ache in my chest. The way he'd looked at me just then, that wasn't the bond. I didn't know what to do with that. But then he drew in a sharp breath and turned his face away. The moment shattered. He pushed off from the door, his posture straightening back into the alpha. His grip on my arm shifted, still firm but now just guiding. He started walking down the hall, pulling me along toward the back exit without a word. We stopped in a moonlit clearing. The only sound was the soft crunch of moss under my boots. Kalen let go of my arm and turned away. He stared at the trunk of an enormous oak tree. The silence was heavier than any command he'd ever given. I waited. I saw the rigid line of his shoulders. They did not look like the shoulders of a man who had just won a fight. "I was too slow once," he said. His voice was a low scrape in the quiet. He did not face me. "People died because I was weak." The words seemed to cost him something. He pressed the heel of his hand hard against the center of his chest. I understood then. His rigid control wasn't about power. It was born from a grief so deep it had become a law. Roderick was trying to prove that Kalen would lose control again. That was why Kalen's face had flashed with fear for me. He was afraid of failing another person he was meant to protect. I moved closer without thinking. Our arms almost touched in the cool air. The bond between us was a dull warmth beneath my ribs. It was a strange comfort amid the cold truth. "It wasn't a mistake," I said. My own voice was quiet. "Your protection, it wasn't just for show against Roderick." I was not asking a question. He looked at me then. His gray eyes were not shadowed or angry. They were just open. For a second, his head tilted toward mine. His breath clouded the space between our faces. I saw the exhaustion around his eyes. It was more than tiredness. It was the weight of a buried thing finally dug up. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. Then he stepped back. He turned his face up toward the moon. His broad back was to me again, a wall of muscle and regret. I wanted to reach out. My hand lifted slightly at my side. But Leo was still out there because of me. The danger was not past. I let my hand fall back to my side, empty. My throat still ached from the unshed tears I'd swallowed back in the grove. I walked into the war room, my boots scuffing against a gritty floor. Kalen was already there. He stood with his back to the door, his hands planted on a large wooden table. Maps and papers were spread out in a chaotic layer. The room smelled like cold coffee and the faint, sharp scent of his frustration. I pulled Leo's phone from my pocket. The screen was cracked, but the message was clear. He said, "Old growth, silent towers. That has to mean something." Kalen didn't turn around. His voice was low and rough. "It does. Roderick took over several old properties when he was pushed from the territory." He finally moved, turning to face me. His gray eyes were shadowed with a fatigue I hadn't seen before. It was more than tiredness. It was the weight of every bad choice. Whatever I felt might just be the bond talking, but seeing him like that made my chest tighten. I had to look away. I stepped up to the table, my fingers tracing the lines on the biggest map. "Show me." For the next half hour, we worked in tense silence. He pointed to locations. I matched them against the phrasing in Leo's text. The bond between us was a quiet hum in my blood, easy to ignore when I focused on the task. Then my hand brushed his as we both reached for the same map corner. A sudden warmth shot up my arm. I pulled back like I'd been burned. He went very still. His own hand stayed on the paper, his fingers pressing down so hard the tips went pale. He didn't look at me, he just kept working. "Here," he said finally. His finger tapped a remote spot marked as a decommissioned forestry station. It was surrounded by dense, mature woodland. 2 old firewatch towers were noted on the survey. Old growth, silent towers. It fit. The relief was cold and sharp. Leo was there. We defound him. Then the reality hit me. It's a 3-hour drive into the mountains, on roads Roderick will be watching. Kalen nodded, his expression grim. I can't take a full patrol. He'd see us coming from miles away. He looked at me then, and I knew what he was going to say before he said it. The plan was already forming, and it required my direct involvement. My freedom was the price for Leo's life. That question, why I'd flinched when he touched my arm, sat there like something unfinished. My shoulders still ached from the rigid posture I'd held over those maps. The lamplight in Kalen's study felt thin and cold against my skin as I stood waiting by the heavy oak desk. He was across the room, his back to me as he looked out the dark window. The only sound was the heavy tick of a clock on the mantel. I was scared of what came next. My breath felt too shallow in my chest. Kalen turned from the window. He crossed the room to the desk but didn't sit. He reached for a small wooden box that sat there. His movements were slow. I saw his hand hesitate for a second above the lid. His fingers, usually so sure, seemed to weigh the act of opening it. That pause was a crack in everything I knew about him. Control was his entire language, and this was a stutter. My mother wasn't a fighter, he said. His voice was low. He didn't look at me when he spoke. He opened the box and lifted out a silver dagger with a worn leather grip. She said this was for protection of another kind. It was about Faith. He placed the dagger on the desk between us. He hadn't planned to say that about Faith. I knew it from the way his mouth tightened after the words left it. He was close now, just on the other side of the desk. The space hummed with a quiet pull. I could feel the warmth of the bond like a shared blanket. My hand twitched at my side. His eyes were on the dagger, then they lifted to mine. We stood like that, not moving. The air was thick with everything we weren't saying and everything we were about to do. I reached out and picked up the dagger. The metal was cool. The grip fit my hand as if made for it. This wasn't a loan, it was a transfer. He was giving me a piece of his history to carry into my future. He was trusting me with a story. I met his look and gave one slow nod. I didn't say thank you. He didn't say be careful. The promise was in the weight of the silver in my palm and the quiet way he watched me take it. Why his mouth tightened after he mentioned Faith? I wasn't going to like the answer. The cold weight of the silver dagger was a new, permanent anchor against my ribs. In the pre-dawn dark at the territory's edge, the only sound was the low, patient hum of the hidden vehicle's engine. Kalen stood by the driver's door checking his gear. The gray in his eyes was almost gone, swallowed by the deep amber of his wolf. He moved with a stiff care that told me his injuries from the last fight were still there. I saw the way his left arm moved a little slower than his right. He was putting on a show of strength for me. I can still go in alone, I said. My voice was too quiet in the thick air. You're drawing a line on a map and walking into his house. He wants that. He hadn't chosen me. Something else had put us here. There was a difference. Kalen stopped his checking. He looked at the keys in his hand for a long moment. He didn't answer. He just opened his door and got in. That pause, that silence was worse than a shout. I got in on my side. The inside of the truck smelled of old leather and pine resin from the trees. We drove without talking. The headlights cut a weak path through the mist. I watched the trees go by and thought about Leo. I thought about what Roderick would do to him to get to us. My stomach turned hard and cold. I pressed my arm against the door. The old bruise, there was a yellow shadow now. And I finally understood why I'd flinched when Kalen touched my arm before. It wasn't him. It was the memory of other hands in other dark places that looked like protection but were just a different kind of cage. We crossed the stream. The water was black and slick under the dim sky. Kalen stopped the truck. "This is it," he said, his voice rough. "Neutral ground starts on the other side. No pack law, just his." He looked at me then, not as an alpha, but as a man about to break every rule he had. The bond between us gave a single, sharp ache in my chest. It felt like a warning. He put the truck in gear. The tires crunched over gravel, then through the shallow water. We crossed over. We were in Roderick's world now. Everything else I could deal with. Why my bruise ached the moment we crossed the water was different. The air in Roderick's warehouse was thick and electric. It smelled like ozone and hot concrete. We crept past rows of rusted machinery. Kalen led with a silent hand. His wolves moved like shadows behind us. We found a cleared space under a broken skylight. Moonlight fell on a post in the center. Leo was tied to it. His shirt was torn. Roderick stood beside him with a thin smile. Kalen stopped dead. The muscles in his neck stood out like cords. He did not look at me. His whole body went still as stone. Roderick raised his voice. It echoed off the high metal ceiling. "Your pup for your promise, Alpha. Renounce the Silvermane Alliance. Say it where everyone can hear, or he dies at moonrise." The threat hung in the oily air. Leo lifted his head. A fresh cut above his eye gleamed wet in the light. He looked at Kaelin. His expression wasn't fear, it was a deep apology. I knew what that alliance meant. It was a wall that kept Kaelin's pack safe. It was his first law. I saw the conflict tear through him. He looked at his own wolves. They watched him, their faces pale. He looked at Leo's battered form. Then he looked at Roderick's triumphant smirk. I saw his hands open and close. His breath left him in a slow, controlled stream. For a second, his eyes found mine. In them, I saw a terrible, familiar resignation. It was the look of someone trading one kind of safety for another, knowing both were wrong. "The alliance with Silvermane is broken," Kaelin shouted. His voice did not waver, but it was hollow. The words fell into the silent warehouse. They felt like a door slamming shut. Roderick's laugh was a short, sharp bark. He slashed the ropes with a quick knife. Leo slumped forward. Kaelin caught him before he hit the concrete. He held Leo up, his arm tight around his shoulders. He stared straight ahead at nothing. He would not look at his pack. He would not look at me. Roderick watched it all with a satisfied tilt of his head. One thing kept pulling at me. What Kaelin had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. The bitter taste of my own bitten tongue still coated my mouth. I knelt to check Leo's bandages in our temporary camp. The damp chill of the clearing seeped through my jeans. Leo slept near the low fire. Kaelin stood apart at the tree line. He stared into the dark. The firelight made the old claw marks across his shoulders look deeper. His stillness was not calm. It was a held breath. I finished with Leo and stood. The silence was a thick blanket. It pressed on my ears. I walked toward Kaelin slowly. I stopped a few feet from him. He did not turn. "They trusted my word," he said. His voice was low and rough. "The Silvermane pack, I gave them my oath of alliance." He finally looked at me. His gray eyes were shadowed. "I broke it today in front of everyone. To save one man, I made my whole pack vulnerable." I understood then. The way he'd looked at me wasn't about the threat. I didn't know what to do with that. My own bruise had throbbed the moment we crossed back into neutral ground. Now I felt the same deep ache in my own chest, mirroring his. It was the bond, carrying the weight of his choice. "You saved family," I said. My voice was quiet. He made a sound, not quite a laugh. It was hollow. "And created a new enemy, a strong one." He shifted his weight. I saw his hand, usually so sure, tremble once before he fisted it at his side. "Every choice I make feels wrong. Protect the pack and let an innocent die. Save the innocent and risk a war." He looked at me fully then. The mask of the dominant alpha was gone. In its place was just a tired man, burdened by duty. "I am so tired of failing." We were close enough that I felt the warmth from his body. I could see the faint pulse at the base of his throat. He leaned forward just a fraction. His forehead nearly touched my shoulder. I held my breath. His scent, pine and night air, was mixed with the sharp smell of his guilt. He stopped himself. He straightened up and took a step back. The distance he put between us felt colder than the night air. "Weakness gets everyone killed," he said. But he said it like he was convincing himself, not me. He turned his face away toward the dark trees. I let my empty hand fall back to my side. The unspoken thing between us hung there, heavier than before. The rest made sense. Why my hand had reached for his before he pulled away didn't. The weight of his confession was still a stone in my stomach as we walked back. The dawn light caught the barbed wire at the border, turning the dew to fire. We returned to the main house under a pale sky. The whole pack was waiting in the muddy yard. No one cheered. The air just smelled of damp earth and cold sweat. My friend Leo stood behind a few others, his head down, his shoulders hunched. Kaelin climbed the porch steps. He gripped the wooden railing so tight the grain went white under his fingers. "We are alone now," he announced. His voice carried over the silent crowd. A young wolf near the front let out a soft whimper. Leo flinched like he'd been hit. "The choice was mine," Kaelin said. "The consequences are mine to bear." That's when Leo pushed forward. He shoved past the others, his face pale. "No," his voice broke. "It's my fault. You had to break the alliance because of me." Kaelin moved fast. He came down the steps and grabbed Leo by the shoulders. "You are Pack," Kaelin said, each word clear and hard. "We do not leave Pack behind. That is the belief. It is not a debate." Leo shook under his hands. "But Roderick is stronger now," he said, his words full of fear. "Because of me." Then Kaelin did something I didn't expect. He pulled Leo into a hard hug. He held him there. The pack watched. Some of them nodded slowly. I felt the mate bond between us give a single, warm pulse in my chest, like a shared breath. When Kalen let go, he kept one hand on Leo's arm. He looked out at all the worried faces. "Then we get stronger," he said. The pack stood a little straighter, but the question hung in the cold air. "How do you get strong before the next full moon?" Kalen's eyes found mine across the crowd. The skin around them was tight with exhaustion. He gave me a single, sharp nod. It was the same nod he'd given me last night under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. It was a promise, a plan, and it included me. Whatever came next, that plan was the part I hadn't figured out. My knuckles ached from clenching my fists while Kalen spoke. Now I stood at the edge of the fighting ring, where the scent of crushed pine needles rose from the dirt. The pack was a silent circle around us. Then Roderick Vex, the rogue alpha, moved. He shoved me forward into the open space. My bad leg buckled and I caught myself on a rough wooden post. "Look at her." Roderick's voice cut the quiet. He pointed at Kalen. "Your alpha claims a mate who flinches from his touch. She is rejected. She is unworthy." Smirk was a blade. The pack's silent watching felt heavier then. Kalen stepped between Roderick and me. His gray eyes were already glowing wolf yellow. His chest heaved. His hands were fists at his sides. "You have no right to speak of worth," he said. His voice was low, but it carried. The muscle in his neck stood out like rope. I had to keep reminding myself he wasn't human. Roderick snapped his fingers. Two of his men hauled a small cage from the trees. A child, no more than 6, whimpered inside. A little Omega girl pressed her face against the bars. Roderick tapped a single claw against the metal. The ringing sound was small and sharp. "The fight begins now," he said. His eyes never left Kalen's face. "The rules are mine. You look away from me, you lose. You try to free the pup, you lose." Kalen froze. His eyes darted from the child's cage to where I stood. A pained growl started deep in his throat but choked off. An old iron bell rang out. How could he protect us both? I saw the exact moment the decision broke him. He had to face Roderick. He had to watch the cage. The conflict locked his muscles rigid. Roderick attacked in that second of distraction. He wasn't a blur. He was a force. He crossed the ring and his fist connected with Kalen's jaw. The crack was terrible. Kalen stumbled back, his focus shattered between two threats. Roderick pressed him with a series of brutal blows, driving him toward the edge of the ring. The child's cries grew louder. Kalen's head turned toward the sound. It was a fraction of a second. Roderick's hand shifted. A silver claw, hidden until now, gleamed in the twilight. He aimed for Kalen's exposed throat. I didn't think. My body moved before my mind could question it. I threw myself into the space between them. The impact was a sickening punch of heat and cold. The silver tore into me instead. A sharp pain exploded across my chest. The force lifted me off my feet. Then I was falling. The packed earth rose up to meet me. The world tipped and went silent. Why my body had moved before my mind could question it? I'd been wrong to ignore that instinct this long. A deep, cold ache radiated from my side with every shallow breath I managed to take. Someone had dragged me into the stale darkness of a storage shed. The only light came from a single dusty window high on the wall. Kalen Thorne knelt in the dirt beside me. His hands pressed hard against the tear in my shirt. The pressure sent a fresh wave of nausea through me. He was ignoring the shouts from outside the thin wooden walls. His hands were not steady. "Stay with me," he said. His voice was low and rough. My vision swam. I saw his face above me. His gray eyes were wide and dark. There was no anger there, just a raw, open fear. It was for me. I knew that. I lifted my right hand. It felt heavy and slow. My fingers brushed against the side of his wrist. His skin was warm. He flinched at my touch. Just a small, sharp movement. "My commands won't work," he whispered. The words sounded torn right out of him. "The silver in the blade. I can't fix this. I can't make you heal." He bowed his head. His forehead came to rest against mine. I felt the warmth of his skin. The bond between us pulled like a tired muscle, our breath mixed in that small space. He looked at my face. His eyes dropped to my mouth for just a second. I saw a deep pain there, a helpless kind of ache. Then he pulled back, sharp and sudden. He tore a long strip from the hem of his own shirt. He avoided my eyes as he worked to bind the wound. The moment was gone, but its weight stayed right there in the quiet shed. My hands had stopped shaking the moment he touched me. That feeling wasn't going away. My palms still ached where Kalen's grip had pressed my bones together. I stepped back into the ring. The air tasted like spent aggression. Kalen stood up. He still held the cloth he'd used to press against my wound. He raised it high so the whole pack could see the dark stain. A low sound rippled through the crowd. Kalen turned slowly. He showed that stain to every single face. He broke the sacred law, Kalen said. His voice was raw but clear. He attacked a mate under an alpha's direct protection. Someone in the back yelled at first, "Dishonor." The cry was taken up by others. It became a chant. Roderick backed toward the tree line. His cold blue eyes scanned the closing circle. He shouted that it was a trick. He said I had thrown myself into the fight. The crowd's roar drowned him out. They moved as one body. They formed a wall around Roderick and his few remaining men. The pack had chosen its side. Then I saw Leo. He was at the edge of the clearing. He had a crowbar. He smashed the lock on the small cage holding the Omega child. The metal gave way with a sharp crack. He pulled the kid out and pushed them toward a pack elder. Then Leo moved again. He planted himself right in the gap Roderick needed to escape. Leo crossed his arms over his chest. "No," he said. The word was flat. Final. Kalen faced his rival. The chance for justice shook the ground under my feet. Roderick was trapped. Kalen began to walk toward him. His shoulders were set. A low growl started in his chest. It wasn't a sound of blind rage. It was the sound of a verdict being delivered. The way he'd looked at me just then, that wasn't the bond. I didn't know what to do with that. My hands had stopped shaking the moment he touched me. Now I kept them still by pressing them against my bandaged side. I held his mother's silver dagger tight in my other hand. I did not look away. The sting of dried sweat still clung to the back of my neck. I followed Kalen into the camp's clearing. The first scent to hit me was the sharp, cold odor of doused campfires. The pack elders were already leading the freed Omega child away. Roderick stood alone in the center. His long blonde hair was matted with dirt. He watched the child go and his whole body went still. That stillness was worse than any shout. "Your banishment starts now," Kalen said. His voice was calm but it carried. He did not look at me. His attention was fixed on Roderick. I saw the line of his shoulders, the way he held himself ready. He was giving Roderick a chance to leave with his life. Roderick's cold blue eyes flicked from Kalen to me. A bitter smile twisted his mouth. "You think this is over," Roderick said. He didn't raise his voice. "You gave up your alliances for a human. Your pack is weak now. I don't need a law to take what I want." He moved then, not toward Kalen but toward me. It was a feint. I knew it was a feint. My body reacted anyway. I stepped back and my boot crunched on a broken piece of charcoal. Kalen moved faster. He placed himself between Roderick and me. He didn't command or shout. He simply acted. I felt a sudden, warm ache in my chest. The bond flared with his protective intent. Roderick changed course. He lunged at Kalen instead. They came together with a sickening thud. This wasn't a challenge fight with rules. This was a desperate, final brawl. I saw Kalen's arm twist to block a blow aimed at his throat. His movements were precise, controlled, even in violence. I remembered what he had said under his breath when he thought I wasn't listening. He had whispered, "I will break myself before I break her." Now he fought not to destroy, but to end, to protect. Roderick fought with the brutal strength of someone with nothing left to lose. He landed a hard punch to Kalen's side. Kalen grunted but didn't falter. He caught Roderick's next swing and forced his arm back. I saw my moment. I didn't have the strength to match them, but I had the silver dagger in my hand. I stepped forward and pressed its cold point against the side of Roderick's neck. He froze. His breath came in ragged pants against the metal. Kalen held him fast, his own breathing harsh in my ear. In that frozen moment, Leo walked out from a nearby tent. He had a cut on his forehead, but he was steady. "The others are free," he said. His voice broke the silence. "It's done." I pushed it aside. Why his breath had caught when he saw the silver dagger, that would come back. The silence in the study was heavy. It was just the two of us now, standing over a map of a world that had just gotten bigger and a lot more dangerous. My side still throbbed, my hand ached, and Kalen, he just looked tired. He didn't move his hand from the map. He stared at that blank space where the Silvermane lands used to be marked. "You saw it," he said. It wasn't a question. I knew what he meant, the tremor in his hand. That tiny crack when he offered Leo a fortress. I saw it. He finally looked at me. "It's not weakness." I didn't say it was. "Others will." His voice was low, gravelly from the fight. "A show of control is everything. A single tremor. It's a story. It gets told, it grows." I looked at our hands on the desk, mine beside his, a mirror of that moment in the grove. "So let them talk. You just want a challenge without killing your challenger. You absorbed a rival pack in a single night. That's the story. He shook his head, a short, sharp movement. That's the surface. The real story is underneath. It's the alpha who hesitated. He pulled his hand back from the map and ran it over his face. When you stepped in with the dagger, when you ended it, I was relieved. The word hung there. For a man like him, it was a confession. You're supposed to be relieved, I said, but it sounded hollow even to me. No. He turned to face me fully, leaning back against the desk. I'm supposed to be the one who ends the threat. I'm supposed to be the final word. Not grateful that someone else did it for me. And here's where it got real. He pushed off the desk and took a single step closer. Not into my space, but close enough that I could see the faint lines of exhaustion around his eyes. The bond chose you, but every day since I have chosen you, to protect you, to stand with you, that choice, it changes the calculus. It makes you hesitate. You start weighing every fight against the cost to her. That's the story they'll see. That's the crack they'll try to widen. I felt that warm ache in my chest, the bond humming with the truth of what he was saying. It wasn't fear in his voice. It was a grim, clear-eyed forecast. So what's the play? I asked. My voice was quiet. He looked at the map again, at his hand now clenched at his side. Then he did the unexpected. He held that hand out to me, palm up just like in the grove, an offer. A question. The play, he said, is that we don't give them a crack. We give them a wall, you and me, not just the bond. An alliance, a real one. I looked at his open hand. I thought about Leo, now under my protection. I thought about the blank spaces on the map, full of new threats. I thought about the weight of an entire pack looking for weakness. My hand didn't rise to mirror his this time. I placed my palm firmly against his, skin to skin. The warmth was immediate, a current that ran straight up my arm and settled deep in my chest. The bond flared, bright and sure, but underneath it was something else. A decision. His fingers closed around mine, not tight, just cert. Okay, I said. It wasn't a romantic declaration. It was a pact. We were two broken things, standing in a quiet room, agreeing to hold the line. Together. Real quick, if you're here for the story of how two damaged people build something stronger than a fairy tale, hit subscribe. The real work starts now. So here's my question for you. When the world is waiting for you to show a single crack, what's stronger? Being an unbreakable stone alone? Or being part of a wall that's chosen to stand together, knowing every piece has its flaws? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to see how this pact holds up against everything that comes next, make sure you're subscribed for the next chapter.